So welcome all to my session. This week we are focusing on Azure Data Factory, which is an orchestration and integration service from Azure, which we can use for collecting the data from different sources. We can analyze the data as well, and we can we can transform the data, and we in this session, and we are going a few demos as well, and we can understand how we can collect the data and we can do the transformation. So myself, Vishnu, I'm a programmer, .NET programmer from Thiruvananthapuram. So each week, I will be conducting some sessions on some particular topic. Regarding this Azure Data Factory, I have already um, added a few audio podcast on this channel. So if you are interested in listening that audio podcast, you can check out that as well. And this will be a live video demo so that you can further understand if you are already listened that particular audio podcast. So no background knowledge is required for understanding going through this session, and the session will be nearly around 2 hours. So because of having this lengthy session, I will be adding the YouTube segments as well, so that you can go to a particular link, particular section of the video, rather than watching the entire video. So with that, we can start the session. If you have any queries or clarification, feel free to add that in the chat window, and you can I can check that periodically, and I can comment on that as well. And if there are a lot of questions out there, I may add that as a text and attach to this video so that you can check that later as well. So coming to the Azure Data Factory, this is mainly used by companies to collect the data. Collecting the data is important because these days, take an example, an organization is creating a product and they have their main website associated with that product. In addition to that, they have also multiple sources of data. So they may have a social media like a Facebook or Twitter, and they may have other data sources like the logs. Then they may have a CRM system in place. So in addition to the main website, they have different sources. Okay, 1 second. Okay. So in addition to the main data, they have different sources of information. That is the logs. They have the social media feeds that is ongoing. So these are rich sources of information, and if the organization can collect these data in a meaningful way and clean up the data, because we don't want to collect all the information that is available from these different data sources. We have to clean up the data in such a way that we want to extract the meaningful information out of those data. And after all the cleanup and everything is done, we want to analyze the data as well. So the final output of all these data is rich sources of information. So one example you can consider is like if a company is launching a particular product, they can understand how the social media or social tweets are going on. Is it in favorable of this product, or in which area a particular product is having too much sales? So all those information they can track out from these rich set of data sources. So that is the reason why these days this analysis of data become much important. In the earlier days, even though the organization have these data in place, they tend to ignore those data sources because of the fact that they need rich mechanisms for processing this information. And it add more expense as well. So to avoid that, they usually tend to ignore those data historically. And nowadays, because of the introduction of cloud systems and much cheaper storage in place, they have the possibility to store these different data in place, and they can do a lot of analysis as well. They can even do a kind of a real-time analysis as well, and that is why the data analysis and in integration and analysis is important in these days, so that the top management of a company or an organization can make rich decisions or better decisions based on those facts. So because of these data, are coming from the actual customers from different inputs. The analysis of these data, if done in a rich and proper way, they will get meaningful insights from those data. So that is the reason why data analysis is important. So this set and this kind of processing of data is actually done by the data engineers. They have they will use different sets of tools. From the Azure end, there is one such tool which we are going to discuss in this session, that is the Azure Data Factory. So you can do the same task without the use of Azure Data Factory as well. So you can have a set of different VMs, a different set of cleanup jobs and the analysis jobs in place on that VM, and you can do all these things even without having this data factory in place. So the advantage of having a service like the data factory is that this is a serverless service from Microsoft, and this is a PaaS offering as well. So you don't have to pay in advance for what you actually want to use. So in case if you want to set up a VM with a multiple set of cron jobs to clean up the data and to integrate all these data from different sources, you have to spend a lot of time in managing those particular things. So when it comes to the Azure Data Factory, Microsoft is providing you an integrated service with all these different functionalities in place inside that Azure Data Factory, so that you can collect all the different data from different area, and you can clean up the data, you can do the transformation as well, and you can finally store the data in some particular place. So the final data is what the companies or the top management is actually interested in. And if done in a proper way, that data will be a rich source of information as well. So so the data factory can provide that kind of thing, and that is what we are going to discuss in today's session. So coming to the data integration and analysis, there are a lot of other services in Azure as well, and also from other cloud vendors as well, like the Amazon and Google. Even within Azure, there are different other services. So I like to mention a few of them as well, so that you will have an idea of that. So coming to the on-premise world, so the SQL developers are already familiar with the SSIS packages. So these kind of packages can be used for collecting the data from an on-premise server, and they can do the transformation, and they finally can store the data in some particular area inside the SQL server. So that those things are called the SSIS packages, and many companies were already having a lot of legacy applications that are developed on top of SSIS packages. So that is one way. And another thing is like if you want to do an on-time migration and to do some analysis on your existing data, the point is on time. If you want to do on time migration and analysis of data, you can always go for some service like the data migration service or something like that. And if you want to process some of the streaming data, you can check out another service called the stream analytics as well. So different services are out there. And even though if you are using such kind of services like the SSIS packages and the stream analytics, the particular feature that is there within the Azure Data Factory is that you can connect your Azure Data Factory to all of those different things. You can connect your Azure Data Factory to a SQL server to collect the data. You can also connect that to a Azure Blob Storage or some different kinds of connectors. We can look into all those connectors as we going through this demo. And in addition to that, if you have an on-premise server with a set of SSIS packages, especially a legacy application which has a lot of SSIS packages in place, you can connect your data factory to that particular SSIS packages as well, so that you can integrate that data and do a lot of cleanup works. So that is also possible. There are different other services like the IoT hubs, the stream analytics out there. So you can check that out as well for your particular case. And coming to the data factory, one thing I mentioned before we actually start creating a data factory for this demo is that there are two versions of Data Factory that are available. That is the V1 version, which is the earlier version, and the V2 version. So the difference is that in the V1 version, we use a configuration file called the JSON to configure the entire environment. And in the V2 version, they have added graphical support so that even a person does not have any background in programming, they can still use a drag and drop approach to create the data factory. They can use that to connect the different data sources. They can use that graphical interface to clean up the data. They can do different kinds of integration, transformation, and all within the graphical interface. So that is called the V2. So it will be good if you create the V2 version, and that will be the default version for all the new data factories. So just to mention the difference, just to let you know about the difference of these two versions. I mentioned that here before we start creating. And another thing is like the transformation of data. That facility is also provided by the data factory. So transformation means that we collect data from different data sources. We want to do some cleanup and we want to transform that data so we can get rich, meaningful information from those data. So transformation can also provide by the Azure Data Factory, provided if it is a simple kind of transformation, and that is possible with the help of data flow. That is a kind of an activity that they added during 2019 to enhance the support of the Azure Data Factory. So previously there were only support for the orchestration, and if you want to do some transformation, you need to connect to an external some service like the HD Insight or some other kind of service to do the transformation. But with the added support they have added in 2019, if your transformation is of a simple nature, and if the resources are within the Azure, you can go for a service like a connector, like the not connector, an activity. What is activity and all those things we will discuss as we going through the session. So don't worry about that. And the activity section, the activities called the data flow, we can use for simple transformations. And that's all. I want to have a quick understanding before we actually go through the session. And again, the main aim of these all kinds of activities which we are going to do is to get rich, meaningful information from data. In this demo, I will show a simple way by which how we can connect to different data sources, how we can use that data to combine, and we can put that in a blob storage. And we can also look into some other scenarios as well. But in the actual a real-time scenario or a production environment, you may have to think about how you want to analyze the data. That part about how we are going to analyze that particular data, that is beyond the scope of this session. This session is just to get an awareness for you that how you can use Data Factory to connect to different data sources, how you can do the transformation, and with that understanding you can delve into more depth about how you can actually do the different kinds of transformations and complex data analysis. So all the different videos and tutorials are available, and that is provided by Microsoft, and you can check that out as well for getting more information on these subjects. So that's all, and I can share my screen and I can start the session by spinning up a demo environment. So for this part, what we are going to do is first we will spin up a data factory environment. So that is the first thing which we are going to do now. So once that is in place, then next we will create an environment, especially the storage, Azure storage. So Azure storage is an object storage that you can create inside Azure for storing different kinds of files. So we use that Azure storage as the data source. So in the real scenarios, in a production environment, what you will be doing is like you will be collecting, somehow you will be collecting all the data into that blob storage, or you can use different other connectors as well. I can show you all those as we go through the demo. But in this particular demo, we will be collecting the information or the data from a particular Azure blob storage and from a CSV file. So how that CSV file has that particular data, that is all beyond the scope. And in the real scenario, in a production environment, you may have to think about how you want to collect the different data sources. So it can be from your Twitter feeds, or it can be from your Facebook feeds, or it can be from some logs, some other CRM systems, or different websites. So different data sources may be there. We can, as we go through the demo, we can understand what all connectors we can use, so that you will have the rich possibility to extend the connector. Around 80 plus connectors are available. So that is what the Azure Data Factory is providing. So with that rich set of 80 plus connectors, we can collect the data from different areas. But again, in this demo, we will be focusing on a particular connector called the Azure Blob Storage, so that we can pull out a CSV file from that particular area, and we can do the transformations, and finally we can store the data. In a real world, you may be using a different connector, you may be using a different set of transformation, and you may be storing that data in a different kinds of set, the target. So that depends upon the project. And another thing is, like, once you spin up an entire thing in the data factory, once you set up an entire flow from the source to the final destination, you can create an entire uh, environment using an ARM template, including all the different pipelines. So this provides the flexibility for the you as a developer, or as an organization. You can spin up different environments like the dev environments, or the QA environment, or live environments easily with the option, easily with that ARM template. And that when Azure, once you set up all the different things within the Azure Data Factory, within all the pipelines, and once you validate everything, and once you publish all things, and once you understand that everything is working perfectly, you can create an ARM template from within the interface. So they will provide an ARM template. So that ARM template has two parts. The first part is like the actual ARM YAML file, which is responsible for spinning up the environment. But to make it configurable, they have splitted that into two separate files. One is the configuration file, and one will be the actual file. So in the configuration file, you will be adding different variables based on your different environments, and you will be deploying that using the ARM deployment. And that way you can spin up the different environments as well. So these are all the things I want to quickly mention before we start the session. Again, this will be a 2-hour session. So as I am going through an on single flow, I will be adding YouTube segments so that you can easily navigate to a particular topic at a later point of time, in case if you are interested. So thank you for attending this session, and we can share the screen, and I will explain the next set of things. Hope you can view the screen now. So using some free account in Azure, or whatever account subscription you are comfortable with, you can have a portal like this. So in my portal, nothing is created as of now. We are entirely creating from scratch, and we are understanding how we can create all these different things. So first of all, we can focus on how we can create a Azure Data Factory, because that is the environment which we need for creating these different set of orchestration and different transformation. So we need definitely a Azure Data Factory. So let's create that. So creating that is very simple. Just click on the search bar, and you can type something like sorry, that not that data factory. So once you type the data factory, you have a service that is available from there called the data factories, and this is the one we need to click. You can do the same from here as well. You can go from here and you can favorite your data factory to here, and you can you can click from there and you can open that particular page as well, or you can go for all services as well. But the easier way that I found is like you can go here and you can create a data factory. So once you click on the data factory, the next step we are going to do is like we actually create a data factory by clicking on this create data factory button. So let's wait. It is actually creating the data factory. So we have to provide a resource group. So we can create a new resource group here for this demo resource group. Whatever name you can provide. Basically, this resource group is a way by which you are organizing your different set of resources in such a way that at a later point of time, if you want to manage all the different resources, you can easily find out that using this resource group. So let's default to demo resource group as of now. That is fine. And region and all things, let's keep it the default on. And name is a unique name which you have to provide, and that can be something like, in case I can create like Vishnu Data Factory or something. And next one is the some error is there. So Vishnu Data Factory, oh, no error is there, fine. And next we can click on next. So this is the area where you are actually configuring the Git repo. So why you need to configure this? This is helpful in a production environment where you want to have your entire data factory and its associated pipelines, its different activities and everything inside a repo in a single YAML file, so that you can manage the entire data factory using that particular file. And at later point of time, if you want to modify something, you can do that from the repository as well. And in case if you want to revert to a previous version, you can do that as well. So that option is provided there. So you can go for that, or for this demo we don't need to configure the Git, so we can simply click on this option called the configure Git later. This option can be configured at a later point of time from inside our data factory environment, so you don't need to bother about all that thing as of now. Next one is networking. So we can create all the different, we can leave all the different options as it is of now. We don't need to bother anything about that because this is just a demo. In the actual production environment, you may have to be a bit careful about whether you want to provide a private endpoint or a public endpoint. But in this case, this is fine. Next one is like click on the advanced. So data factory is encrypted by default. Every data that is stored inside the data factory is encrypted with a server-side encryption, and the key will be automatically provided by the Microsoft, and it will automatically encrypt all the data that it is processing, and it is also decrypting the data and providing back to you inside the pipelines or different activities. One thing I want to particularly mention here is like data factory does not have a store associated with it. It is just collecting data from different areas. It is doing all the transformation, and it is finally doing storing the data in some location, data store independent of data factory. Data factory has no mechanism for actually storing the data. For storing the data, you may have to think about using some of the mechanism like Azure Data Warehouse, which is nowadays called the Synapse Data Analytics, or the SQL server, or whatever kind of data store you want to use. Maybe you can also store that inside a blob storage as well. So the storage is outside the scope of data factory. That is the main thing you need to aware. But while working on the data, it encrypts all the data. And if you want to have a compliance requirement for your project that you have to provide a customer managed key, you can have that option as well by clicking on this. In this case, we don't have to bother that much about providing a customer key. So we can just leave this as default, that is unchecked. Next one is tag. Tag is also similar, like the resource group for management purpose. So in case you want to, you can have different data factories that you can create inside a single Azure account. So inside a single Azure account, you can have up to 84 different kinds of data factories, and 84 or more can be connected. So when you create a massive number of data factories, there lies a responsibility for you to identify which all data factories are for a particular environment. So for that purpose, you can have a tag and a value associated with this data factory. So you can have a simple tag like something like a department. So if you are doing something like a HR department or something, you can have something like this, or even you can have an environment as well, something like this environment. So dev or something, you can have any tags and any values as you like. And even if you don't want to bother all those things, you can leave that as well. And next one is like a review, and it will review the entire things which we have just provided, and then it will automatically create the account, create the data factory. So let's wait. It is reviewing all the data which we provided. So validation has passed. So if some error is there, it will automatically notify that. In this case, there is no error, so everything is fine, and we can go ahead by clicking on create. So this will take some time. Now Azure is spinning up that data factory environment, and this will take some bit of time. Deployment is in progress. So while that is going on, we can work on creating a storage. Storage is actually the data source which we are going to use in this demo. So for that purpose, we are using an Azure data storage. So for that, we can create that environment as well, storage account. So we can click on the storage account. So no storage account is there as of now. We can simply click a create storage account. Okay. Okay, we can select a resource group which we created earlier, so that we can categorize all the different services which we are creating for this demo under this particular resource group for easy management purpose. Next one, you have to provide a unique storage account name. So in case if it is not unique, Azure will show a validation error. So let's create something. Let's provide something like Vishnu storage account 001. I usually give this in some of my demos, so maybe this is not available. I think it is available, not a problem. And then we have to select a region as well. So let's leave that default, the East US as of now. All the other things you can leave default for the demo. That is not important as of now. In the actual case, you have to look into all these different options in a bit more detail about what impact it is going to affect. So this is about the redundancy. You can have different redundancy mechanisms in place, so that in case if one instance fail, you can have a copy in other instance as well. That is the geo redundant storage. So let's leave these as all default. Next one is the advanced tab. Keep all this default as of now. You don't have to change anything. Next one is the networking tab, and there also the public endpoint is now enabled. In actual production, you can change this always depending on the security what you need. For this demo, this is fine. Next one is data protection. So you can configure the different data protection options, like if you want to retain some deleted blobs, you can have that. And if you want to enable soft deletes, you can have that. These are specifically for the storage related activities to enhance the storage capabilities, in addition to the way by which it stores the data. So for compliance requirement, you can check these all different things. The next one is tags. These already we discussed in while we were creating the data factory. Similar is what applicable here as well. Next one is review, and next one we can create this. Hope you notice something called the ARM template here. This one is actually used for spinning up the different environments and its resources. So all the different resources that we are creating here as part of this demo, you can create that entire environment using an ARM template as well. That is a way by which you actually use a code file for creating an environment. This will be helpful when it comes to a massive production environment where you can have different environments like the dev, QA, production, and you can have a single ARM template file with a configurable option so that you can pass the values accordingly to different parameters according to the different environments, and you can spin up the required environments as you like. And if you want to modify something to an environment, you can simply modify the main file and it affects all the different environments as well. So that is the flexibility when you actually use a template or an ARM template for automation purpose. Now we are actually creating the same thing using a portal. That is fine for demo, but in the actual environment, actual production, you may be using an ARM template for this purpose, this different creations, and you can automate that. And in case if you want to don't need a data factory for a certain period of time, you can entirely drop that data factory as well. Similar to the VM, if you drop the VM, you don't have to pay anything for that. So same way you can always drop a particular environment or particular resources as whatever way you like. And in the data factory, you are going to pay for what actually you are using. So when you run a pipeline, you have to pay for that running the pipeline. When you debug, you have to pay for that. What is pipeline and all those things we will discuss soon as we going through the session. So let's keep in mind that in data factory, you are paying for actually what you are using, especially the pipelines, the activities you are running, and the data transfer and all sort of things is what you are actually paying for, and the processing as well. Okay, and next one is like the create. So we are creating the storage account now. So let's create that. So similar to the data factory which we created earlier, Azure is now spinning up a storage account. So once this storage account is created, we have the option to store files inside that storage account inside a container. So we can create different containers. That is also a good practice while working with the data analysis project. If you store everything inside a single container, it will be difficult to manage. So it will be good to create different containers, different folders to identify what is raw data or the unprocessed data, what is the actual data, or what is the transformed data. All those things you can have different folders, and you can keep that for easy maintenance. So now the storage account is created. We can go to that storage account. So this Azure storage account is a kind of a multi-model where you can store different kinds of data. Like you can have an object storage inside the containers. You can have a file share, and you can have a queue storage as well as table storage. We are not focusing on all these different other options like the file share, queues, or tables. What we are interested in this demo is to store a CSV files, two CSV files inside a container. So that is what we are interested in this demo. So we can click on this container option now. And just like I mentioned earlier, for the sake of easy maintenance, we can create different containers so that we can identify what is raw data and what is transformed or the curated data. So let's click on this plus sign for creating a new container. and we can simply call this as row, and the access is now private. That is the safest way by which no one is able to access that. But for this demo, I am changing this to container anonymous read access for containers and blobs. Production environment, you may have to be a bit careful about what option you are actually using. So let's create this one. And similar to row, we are also creating a container called the curated. In the beginning of the session, I mentioned about we are collecting the data from different sources and using the data factory. We are actually working on the data. We are making some transformation to the data, and we are finally storing the transformed output into a particular area. So the transformed output is what is called a curated means. So we can create a container for that one as well. And let's create that. So you can create as many containers as you like based upon how you want to actually store the data. In a real scenario, in a production scenario, which you have complex data transformations needs, it will be a good practice to create different containers or different folders inside the containers as well. You can have different folders inside these particular containers as well to easily manage the different data that you want to have. So now we have two containers called the raw container as well as the curated container. The next step we are going to do now is to bring some data into the raw container. Again, in the actual scenario, you may have to collect the data from different other areas, but for explaining how you can actually start working on the data factory, you can just check on this particular scenario where I am reading two CSV files from inside a raw container. So let's upload the data. And before uploading the data, let's look into what that actual data looks like. So I already have a data with me. So that is downloaded from a website called COVID India. This is not an actual data. This is kind of a dummy data that is created by someone. So it has the status of COVID from across different states. So they have splitted that into two files. So this is the actual data we are going to work on. So let's open that and let's see how it looks like. It's basically a CSV file. Let's open that and let's see how it looks like. It's simply how a few set of data like the state, the total cases, active, discharged, death, active ratio, discharge ratio. This is simply I collected from internet. So it has data up to the Ladakh. And if you open this is the first file. If you open the second file, we have another set of options like up to West Bengal, from Lakshadweep to West Bengal. So you can do different kinds of transformations. So in this file, I actually have the active ratio, discharge ratio, death ratio, and everything that is within provided by that file itself. So I don't have to bother anything about that all different figures. But in case if you have a data like the total cases active and discharged and including the death, you can calculate all the different other things from the data factory as well. This is fairly simple analysis, but in the real scenario, you can have complex analysis as well. You can merge multiple files. You can do complex set of transformation from different areas, different data sources, and you can have different set of analysis as well using this data factory. In this case, for the demo, we are looking on a simple scenario like I have two different sets of data and I want to combine that into a single file and I want to store the data. For this purpose, actually, data factory is not at all required. You can simply use a union inside your SQL and you can do the same thing there as well. But you can, by learning it through how you can do the same thing using the Azure Data Factory, you will get a fairly good idea about what all different options that the Data Factory provides. And with that information, you can use complex analysis and complex transformations as well. So that is what we are going to achieve through this demo. So let's copy this path, and we can go to copy this path, and let's go to the yeah, the row container, and we can upload the file here. Okay, so the file is here. We are uploading these two files here. Again, inside the file, we have a set of states up to Ladakh in one file, and in the second file, we have the remaining states as well. So now everything is uploaded to this row container. Now we are going to look into how we can use the Azure Data Factory to connect to this particular storage account. And by doing that, we will learn a few other things like what is pipelines, what is activity, and all the different other things. So please stay on. Okay, now everything is uploaded. Now I am going to my data factory. So I have already created the data factory, and now that is active here. So this is the data factory's main screen, where you can have the entire information about how much pipeline or how much activities you run inside that particular data factory, how much triggers are run, how much integration runtime are used. You may be wondering what all these different options are. I will explain that in a bit moment when we going to actually create a pipeline. For this purpose, you can simply click on the Azure Data Factory, start authoring and monitoring, where you actually add your different pipelines. So I clicked on that. Please hold on till it opens. It may take a bit of time to open the file. And once open the file, we can have a play on it. So Azure provides different interfaces for creating all these different things from here. Like I mentioned in the start of this demo, we can connect our Azure Data Factory to different connectors. You can even connect to an SSIS, provided if you have a legacy application in place, or you can use just for ingesting the data. So three important activities are what usually happening inside a data factory. First one is ingestion of data from different data sources. Second one is like orchestrating, like how we want the data in place, and then we transforming the data, and finally we storing the data. Main part is like the ingestion and the transformation. You just aware of those important things. Somehow you want to collect the data from some particular different sources, and you have to work on that data. You can have orchestration, and you can also transform the data. So this is called code-free data pipelines, means that even those who don't have a background in coding or programming, they can also simply using this graphical interface, they can create these pipelines entirely. So we can, once this page is open, so this page is opened by clicking on the open Azure Data Factory start authoring and monitoring section. And once that is open, you can click on this left side, the author tab, for creating a pipeline and associated things. So before creating a pipeline, you have to first create a data set in place. So this data set is important. We are actually creating a pipeline to collect the data and then do the transformation. But for the pipeline to work, it needs a data set in place. So we have our data, as you can understand, like we created a storage account before. We stored our data inside this particular containers, and it have the raw file, and we have two different set of files called the COVID status 01 and COVID status 02. And that is there inside this storage accounts. So I hope you understand that particular part. Now we want to connect our data factory to this particular storage account. So for that we need a data set. So you can simply click on here and click on new data set, and you can have different options to collect data from different areas. So you can collect from an Azure blob storage. That is what which we are going to do now. In addition to that, you can have different other options as well. So it's worth interesting to check these options as well, so that you get a familiarity of all these different things. So before that, we can have a break for around 5 minutes, and we can back with the session. So let's have a short break for around 5 minutes, and we can back into the session. I think we can continue the session. So I'm back now. So let's leave this, and we were trying to connect to a data store. So we have our CSV file inside the blob storage. We have two files there, as you saw earlier. that is the COVID status 1 and COVID status 2. And from within the data factory, we are trying to connect to that particular storage. That we will do in a moment, but before that, let's look upon what all different connectors are provided by Data Factory, so that by understanding that at a later point of time when you are working on different projects, you can have this familiarity as well. So if your data is residing inside Amazon Redshift, which is a data warehouse offering from the Amazon, you can have that option as well here. And if your data is actually residing inside the Amazon S3, which is another similar object storage like the Azure blob storage, you can read the file from there as well. In addition to that, Amazon Marketplace have a lot of web services also. So there also you can connect that. So now I have chosen the all option. So it will show all the different things. And another thing is like if I want to collect from Azure blob storage, I can have that as well. And that is the option which we will be exploring in a moment. And if you have a data inside the Azure Cosmos DB, that option is also supported. Azure Cosmos DB has different kinds of APIs in place. We can use different APIs like the SQL API, the MongoDB API, Table API, Graph API. Regarding Azure Cosmos DB, I have also covered a session. So if you are interested, you can check that from my YouTube channel as well to get a familiarity of that thing. So this Azure Cosmos DB, if you are having data there, you can use this to collect that. Similar to that, you can, if your data is residing inside Azure Data Lake Storage, you can read from there as well. Similarly, Azure has a different relational database offerings. So if you want to read from MariaDB or MySQL or PostgreSQL, you can have that option as well. And later, if we have time in the demo, we can show how we can read a sample data from Azure SQL database and how we can transform or store that particular data inside a blob storage as well using the data factory, provided if we have time. Similar different option like Azure File State, Synapse Analytics. So this is what I mentioned at the beginning of the session. This is the SQL data warehouse offering from Microsoft. So it's used for large scalable data storage, and it's a relational database. And if you want to read from there, you can have that as well. Azure Data Table Storage is supported. Then then other different connectors like the Dynamics 365, then the Google Cloud API. Google also has an cloud storage in place, which is called the Google Cloud Storage, and you can use an S3 API for reading from there as well. Google also has a data warehouse called the BigQuery, and you can connect from there as well. In addition to that, different other options. See, a lot of different connectors are provided, and maybe if you check this video at a later point of time, they may add different other connectors as well. So it's kind of a flexible service by which we can expect to add more as of now, but all the things which is provided as of now is enough for satisfying the different requirements. That is the advantage we get from using a managed service like this data factory. Everything we needed for a particular task like the data analysis task or data integration task, everything is provided by the Microsoft through this data factory service. So we don't have to investigate a lot to collect the different other services to assemble those different things and to work out on that. We don't need to do work on those different areas. So everything is provided from here itself, so that you can check that out as well. So next one is like here it is raining, so you may experience a bit difficulty in listening. So please use earphone as well. So I am sitting outside near to my home, so in my balcony, so a bit sound disturbance might be there. I'm not sure. So in case if you are not clear in what I am telling, please use a earphone. So different options are out there. And if you want to go to a particular option like the database option, you can filter that out as well. And if you uh, want to work out from the Azure service itself, you can filter that out as well. So cloud is nowadays going on in a kind of a vendor neutral way, like you can have the data from different other providers and you can read the data from different other providers as well. So that is why they are providing the different options like the Amazon, Google, etc. But if you want to have the data, if you want to read the data from within the Azure, you can check out these Azure options as well. Next one, we can connect to the blob storage. So let's click on this one and let's click on continue. So now we have to provide what format type we want. As you understand earlier, we have our data in CSV format. So we can provide this delimited text here and click on continue. Then we have to provide a name for our data set, which can be something like a COVID data set 01 or something. So this is a convenient name which you can provide for understanding which data set you are working on inside your data factory, and providing a convenient name will be helpful because when you are working on a large set of data, that can help you to identify which data set you are currently working on. You can always add data set at any point of time. So in case if you are progressing with your Azure Data Factory analysis project and at a later point of time, if you want to add more data set, you can have that as well. All the different data sets that you are adding will be remain under this data set part. Next one is like the linked service. So we not yet connected to the Azure Blob Storage. We only provided some of the options. So now is the actual connection happening. For the actual connection to happen, we need to provide a linked service. So let's check on any linked service there. There is currently no linked service there as of now. So we can simply click on new. And automatically, because we have provided the Azure Blob Storage, it automatically identified that it has the Azure Blob Storage to be connected. So it automatically came up with a name like Azure Blob Storage 1. So that is fine. Next one is like the integration runtime. This one is also important while working on Azure Data Factory. So this integration runtime is the actual compute engine behind the scene that is used for connecting to that is used for the data factory to work on. So now we are dealing with the Azure Blob Storage, which is a database, which is a storage service that remains inside the Azure. So we can leave this default to auto resolve integration runtime so that the data factory will automatically identify which runtime it needs to connect. So it's not a problem at all. You can remain this with this one as of now. And there are other options as well, but that is you don't need to bother anything about that. You can just stick on with the auto resolve integration runtime. For sake of understanding, I will mention other options as well. One other option is the SSIS runtime, where you want to connect to an existing SSIS, you may need to provide that. And another one is like one more option is there. Like if you want to connect to an on-premise database or something, you also need to provide something else as well. So let's click on new, and what all we can provide, we can understand from here. Now the default option which the data factory uses is called the Azure. That is automatically resolved by default because we have provided the auto resolved identifier. But if you want to connect inside an on-premise environment where you have a set of data in place inside a firewall, some organization have that kind of setup where their data and their set of data sources is remaining inside a firewall on an on-premise or private network. So for that purpose, you can have this self-hosted option as well. Um, for other activities like connecting to different other cloud vendors and Azure, you can have this Azure option as well. So let's leave this for the moment. We can cancel this and let's stick on with the default auto resolve runtime for the moment. Next one is we have to select an Azure subscription and we can select this one, and we have to select a storage account name. So that will be auto populated because that is inside the Azure account I am working on. So that is fine. And everything we can leave default as it is, and then we can click on create service. So this linked service is just like a kind of a connection string where in your application you used for connecting to your particular application to a particular database or storage. Similar way, this data factory uses this linked service as a kind of a connection string to connect to this particular blob storage. Now we have our blob storage connection string is in place. Next we have to provide which container we want to collect the data from. So we created two containers like the raw container and the curated container. So this raw container is actually having the original input file we already stored there, like the COVID status 1 and COVID status 2. We also have a curated container which we created for storing the final output as well. So we need to create two different data sets for that purpose, because the data factory needs to have a data set to work on. It can't connect directly to this storage account. It can connect to storage account indirectly through this linked service, and that is what we have seen here. But we need to connect the data set and linked service in advance. So now we are in the process of connecting to the Azure Blob Storage and its associated containers. So let's provide that container here. So this container exists. So we provided that as well here. And next one is like okay. And we can also provide that file name as well, so that we can connect to this one. So let's provide that file name like row. Which one is the file name? COVID status 01. So let's right click. Okay, let's copy this file name and we can provide that here. So I think everything is fine now, and let's click on OK. So now one particular data set is connected, and let's preview that data as well. We can click on preview data and we can view all the different data here which we gathered from that particular data set, that is the CSV file. So here if you look into that, it automatically identifies the header and everything. So we can do one thing. We can provide an additional option to treat the first row as header. So if you provide that, it will automatically correctly identify that particular data here. So now everything looks fine. Okay. And one data set is now established, and now we can create next data set to connect it to the next set of data, that is this COVID status 02. So for that purpose, you can connect to the new data set here, and similar to what we have done earlier, we can provide the Azure Blob service connected, then the delimited text. Then here you have to provide a unique identifiable name for working with the different data sets. So let's say COVID data set 02. And linked service, we already have a linked service in place, and we are using that same blob storage to read this data as well. So we don't need to create another linked service here. We can simply select that as well. Now next one is like we have to provide the data, the container path, which is the row, and the file as well. So file is like the COVID status 01. So we can provide that as well. And let's click on OK. So now two data sets are connected here. Next, we want to connect one more data set because we want to store the final data in the curated container. So we have two containers here, raw container, and we have created two data sets to connect these different things. And next one is like the final output. We want to combine these two different data sets into one, and we want to store that data inside the curated container. So for that purpose, we can create a new output data set to that will connect to the curated container as well. So again, the same steps which we have done, we can do that here as well. So we can click on this option, Azure Blob Storage, and we can go to the delimited text, continue. And here, I can provide something like output data set. And linked service is same on which we can choose because that is the same one, and the container path is different. Like earlier on we have provided the raw, but here we have to provide the curated one, and remaining all things we can simply keep as it is now. We don't have a file for that because the file is what it determines automatically when it do the union that we will do in a moment, and at that time only that is required. So let's click on OK. So now three data sets are created. So these two are the input data set and these two are the output data set. Here we are actually reading the data from inside a blob storage from two different files, and we are planning to combine that output and store that to output data set. So for doing the transformation, so combining is a kind of a transformation. If you want to simply copy this data to output data set, we can simply use a activity called the copy activity, which we can create it inside the pipeline. So this is the pipeline. So we can click on the new pipeline and we can select the different activities here. So to move the data across different blob containers or from different locations, like it can be from your SQL server or it can be from your different connectors which we have seen earlier. So from any of that connectors or even from within the SSIS packages, you can copy the data and you can move that to a particular area. But here actually we are actually transforming the data. So we actually don't need the copy here. We only need the data flow. That is a kind of a transformation activity that is provided by this data factory. So if you search for data flow here, it will automatically show that as well. So you can simply drag and drop it here, and if you open that, or what we can do is we can simply create a data flow from here, and finally once we have done the data flow, we can add that to this pipeline as well. So the pipeline we can have different orchestration mechanisms. We can copy data from one to another, but here we are actually combining the data. So first we can set up that data flow, and then we can combine the data, and then we can finally copy that particular activity inside our new pipeline. So the data flow, it is actually asking to provide a source here. So we can click on the add source here. It will show all set of these tooltips which you can use for identifying the different things. You can always read that tooltips, but for the moment I discarded that all different options which they provided. So the source, what we can do is like we can simply rename it COVID data set 01 or something. Okay, and then we have to select a data set. So if you drill down that, you can have these different data sets here. So you can simply select this COVID data set here, and we can have the source options here. You can do additional options as well here if you want. If you want to modify something, or if you want to do a projection or something, you can have different other options as well. So now all the different options I will keep it as it is. Next one is like the partition option. Okay, let's remain as it is now. Then the other option, then the data preview. So for the data preview to happen, actually you need to turn on the debug mode. So to turn on the debug mode, you can simply click on that. So this is a useful mechanism so that you can identify what data is inside a particular data set. Earlier when we created the data set, we had a preview there as well. But to have the debug of data preview inside the data flow, you need to enable this option. This will take some time, and once that is enabled, it will automatically show all the data that is inside that particular data set. You can have additional options like if you want to add more columns, or if you want to do some more mappings, or if you want to delete a particular column, or you can adjust that inside these different settings. But for the demo, we are not bothered all these different things. We are just planning to combine this data, and we want to show that inside. We want to store that inside a blob storage. That is only what we are aiming through this demo. But because you have the now you got the idea that you can have these different options, you can always work on this, and you can always change that, and you can model your data as you like, whatever way you want, and you can finally get valuable insights from that data part as well. Again, we are not going particularly into the data analysis part or about what useful information we can analysis from. We get analysis from this particular COVID data. That is not part of this session. So in the actual production or in the actual data project, you may have to think about that as well, like what all we want to do. Now we are exploring some of the options only, so that you get a familiarity about how you can actually use these different options to connect these things. So let's wait a few more minutes for the session to start. It's actually debugging. Sometimes it will take a few minutes, sometimes it will happen fastly. So again, let's wait on. Okay, while the debug is starting, we can add the other source as well. We have added one data set to the data flow. We can add the other source as well. So we can say, we can name this like a COVID data set data stream. Stream will be the ideal name, I think. I have provided this as a data set, but data set is different. Stream will be the actual ideal name, and we can provide that. We can change the earlier on which we created as well. So COVID data set is there. So let's click on data preview. So debug is yet to start, and that time we can click on this COVID data set, and we can change the source set like COVID data stream 01. So now it's everything looks fine. This is COVID data stream 1, and this is COVID data stream 02. So you have to provide a unique name. That is why the error is displayed here. So now everything looks fine. Okay, now the data flow debug is ready. I hope we can preview the data now. So let's click on data preview. So it's actually previewing the data. So it is fetching the data. This may take a few minutes. In some cases when I try, it comes very fast. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time. So here we can provide different options as well. So because this is having a limited set of data, we can provide this single partition as well. So that will be fine instead of having multiple partitions and take a lot of time. But in the production environment, you need to think about how you can provide this option. You can have that data details from the documentation as well. So let's refresh this data. Preview. Okay, now the data is displayed here, I think. Okay, so now the data is displayed. We can some some extra columns have come up, which you can delete that as well. So this is the actual data, like the state, total cases, and Haryana. And okay, you can always adjust or add different columns as you like, depending upon how you actually want the data. So now we can union these two different data streams into one. So for that purpose, you can click on here, and you can have different other transformations as well. If you want to join the data to a different data stream, you can have that as well here. But here we are interested in union of these two data. So let's look on the union here. And union, once you enabled that option, you already understood that it is connected to the first data set, but we want to connect to the second data set as well. For that purpose, we can have the union with option is there. So the incoming stream is COVID data stream 01, and the union with the stream, you can provide the COVID data stream 2, which will automatically connect these two data in place. So now it will do the union. And if you look into the data preview, you can have the data here. So it will again take some time to fetch the data, and it will display the data. And keep in mind that you can always add columns. You can do the different transformations as well from within these different options. And in addition to that, you can have a rich set of other options as well, like you have seen here, like you can do an join operation, conditional split or exist. So and all the different other kind of activities as well here, data flow transformation activities as well. Some of the simple transformations you can do that from using this data flow mechanism, but if it is a complex data mechanism, data transformation which you need to do, you have to think about using data bricks instead of data flow. So this is a fairly simple kind of transformation that is possible joining two different data sets. So we are reading that data from two different CSV files that is inside the storage container, and we are combining that into one. And finally, we can store that particular. So now union is done. So next we want to store this particular data in a blob storage, so that storing part, it's called the sync concept in this data factory, and that is the option by which we can provide the destination. So select the sync option here. So the sync option is now in place, and what you can do is like you can have different other options as well. If you want to remove the duplicate input columns or other different options, you can do that as well. So now it is kind of an auto mapping. And if you want to remove some of the columns, you can have that as well. So some of the extra columns that somehow came into here because of that wrong data sets, you can remove that as well. Let's leave for auto mapping as of now. We don't know how to look into all the different other options. So data preview is there. So click see the error. Okay, so there is one error in sync because the output data set is required. That is what it is displaying. So we don't provided an output data set yet. So we have provided an incoming stream here. We have to provide an output data set also. You know that we already created an output data set which is connected to the curated container. So we can provide that now, like output data set. Now everything is in place. Then I think everything looks fine. Now we can test the connection. So connection is successful. Let's look on the settings. We can have a file name option as well, so that by which we can provide a file name. So let's select to output to single file option here. and we can provide a file name as well, like the combined data set or something dot csv. Again, extra options are there, you can always provide. And finally, I think everything looks fine now. Okay, so we can validate this and then we can publish that. So once you have done a set of pipeline, so a pipeline is what you are um, um, a pipeline is what we are trying to create here. So that pipeline can have different activities. So in our case, we are actually reading the data from two different data sets and we are combining that. So for that, a single activity called the data flow is what enough for that purpose. So we combined all that inside this data flow here, and that is the only one activity we have as of now. So we can drag that to this particular pipeline. So you can drag that data flow to particular pipeline. So now our pipeline has one activity in place. So this is the concept of pipeline. So this pipeline, these activities, and the other things which we have discussed earlier, like the integrated runtimes, the linked sets, these all, once you get an understanding of all these different things, you can create an entire pipeline from scratch by using this drag and drop interfaces. So the pipeline is actually, it's a kind of a logical grouping of activities to perform the unit of work. So here we are using a transformation. In your actual case, you may want to copy the data from different sources. Maybe you have a different kind of what to say, a SQL server in place where you want to copy the data from that SQL server to a particular blob location. And you know that SQL server has a kind of a relational database with it having its rows and columns, and the format is in a different way. You may want to output that as a CSV. For that purpose, you can have different activities which you can use. So one such activity is called the copy data. Again, for this demo, we don't need copy data in place, but in the actual scenario, sometimes you may need to copy the data from a relational database or some other data source. So for that purpose, you can use a copy data like this. Now these two activities will run independently, but we can connect that as well. But before that, we can so here also it has different kinds of options, like if you create a data set that is connected to Azure SQL Server, and if you choose that particular data set as an option here, so this copy data will have a sync option inbuilt by which you can output that particular data set in a CSV format or whatever format that you want. So you can have different data sets, output data set as well, that will store the data. We can run the pipeline which we created now. So if we have more time, we can do a demo of the demo for copying the data from SQL Server and storing that into an Azure blob storage. For this part, we don't need that, and we just need a data flow that is enough for this purpose. And here we have different other options as well, like once the data flow is completed, we can have different options like what we want to do. So on completion of this data flow, if you want to add some other activity, you can always do the connect to that particular activities. In this case, we have only one particular activity called the data flow, so we don't need to do anything there. Next step we want to do here is, again, we want to cross check all the different options which we have provided, and we can check out our pipeline as well. So pipeline is a logical grouping of activities. So in our pipeline, we have one activity called the data flow, and this is useful for some kind of simple transformations which you can do within the Azure Data Factory. And for the complex kind of data transformations, you can check out the Azure Data Brick for that purpose. And next thing is like inside the pipeline, we have different set of activity. So each activity each can be treated as like a kind of a step on data. So here we are actually doing a step on data, like we are actually transforming the data, we are combining the data. So the activity can be different types, like it can be a copy data as well. Not just copy data, it can have different other options as well, like the move and transform, the data explorer, different other kinds of options also you can do that. Also you can use an HD insight to do some other transformation as well, or if you want to connect to Databricks also you can do that. In case if you want to connect to Azure function, you can have that. So all these are different kinds of activities. So each activity is a kind of a step on data. In simple cases, in most of the project, it will be basically a copy, that is ingestion of data, then or the transformation of the data. And underneath that, all these different things, there will be a kind of a infrastructure, and that is called the integration runtime. And we provided in this demo, that is the auto resolve at the runtime, so that Azure will automatically figure out, or the Azure Data Factory will automatically figure out what runtime should be chosen behind the scene. And the linked services which we created here, that is a kind of a connection string which the Data Factory used for connecting to different data sources. So everything looks fine. So once everything is fine, then we can validate this thing. So one error is displayed, like a file name option output to single file requires single partition to be the selected data type. So okay, let's click on that. Some error is there. So let's correct that. So we have provided settings output to single partition. So we can click on optimization, and we have to select the single partition. So to output to a single file, we need to select the single partition option. So let's validate again. So now it is validated properly, and our data factory with all the pipelines and its activities has been successfully validated. No errors were found, and we can simply publish now. So once that is published, it will ask a confirmation, like these different things. You are about to publish all the pending changes. Okay, fine. So now it is publishing this data factory, and once this is published, we can run this particular data factory so that we can understand how it runs and how it looks like. Before that, we can verify whether anything is there inside the curated folder. So nothing is there. So the process which we have done now in the data flow is combining the data, and we will output that data inside this curated folder. So for that, we can simply run this particular pipeline. We can go for the pipeline option, and you can add different triggers. So once the pipeline is there, we can have different triggers, like you can have you can trigger it now, which is what we are going to do now, or you can schedule the trigger as well. So you can add the different set of triggers. So trigger is another important concept you need to understand when working with the data factory. So mainly there are 6 components we need to understand. One is the pipeline, which is what you can view here. Second one is the activities inside the pipeline. So that activity can be a data flow or a copy data or whatever. And each activity is a kind of a step on data. And another one is the integration runtime, which you don't need to bother much about because Azure will automatically choose that by default. Another one is like the linked service, that also we have seen earlier while creating the different data sets. So it's like a connection string for connecting to that particular data sources. And next one is like the data set. So data set is the actual representation of data that we are actually working on. So your activity or the activities inside your pipeline will be actually contacting this particular data sets. So it is reading data from 2 different data sets and outputting the data to another data set. So activity pipeline and data set is what all the important concepts of this Azure Data Factory. Yes. And the so everything is fine. We can now run the trigger as well. So you can have different triggers as well. You can have a scheduled trigger. So these are different options out there. So you can have a scheduled trigger, or you can have a tumbling window kind of trigger as well. So there are some event based trigger as well. So event based trigger as of now, only the Cosmos DB event is now support. Storage event, let's check on which one is available. So only the currently it is the yeah, only the blob storage trigger is what currently available as of now. So if you want to have a event based trigger that you want to trigger, especially while saving some data inside the blob or something, you can have this event based trigger as now. Maybe at a later point of time, they will add more support for different other options, different other kinds of trigger. Then the schedule is what it's kind of a fixed window where you can have this trigger to run on a fixed schedule like night 12 p.m. or 1 p.m. or something like that. And the tumbling window is for like a kind of a historical running of data where you can have a tumbling window, and if you want to run a set of things that is between a particular timeline, you can have this tumbling window option. So different differences between all these can be available from the Azure documentation, especially from this data factory documentation as well. Okay, then next one is like okay, we can discard this one. We can simply trigger this now to see how this pipeline is running. So it is running the pipeline. So once this is running, we can verify how the pipeline is progressing by clicking on this monitor tab here. So you can see the different pipelines that are running here. So now the pipeline is in progress. So let's wait a few minutes for the pipeline to complete. And once it is completed, we can verify that. And in case if there any error happens, we can verify that as well. So let's wait for a few minutes. So it's still in progress. It may take up to 1 or 2 minutes for the pipeline to complete. So while the pipeline is running, I can mention some other important facts as well. Like in the activity, we used a data flow activity now that is suitable for simple scenarios. For complex scenarios, you can use the data bricks. And the other things like movement of data, you can use the copy activity. So this copy activity is not just a simple kind of a copy like what we have seen in the copy tools. It's more than just a copy. It can even do a serialization and a deserialization as well. And it can convert one particular format to a different format. Like you can read the data from a SQL server and you can output the data to a CSV as JSON or whatever format as you want in your project. And this copy activity and every other activities inside this particular pipelines, especially they are kind of an enterprise standard where you can have incremental copy. In the case of example of the copy activity, you can have the incremental copy resume. Then you can have the access control list where you want to restrict particular users for this one. You can have that as well. And once all the pipeline is in place, you can generate an entire ARM template from this pipeline as well, so that you can have the flexibility to create once an ARM template and you can customize it as required for different kinds of environments. So when they generate the ARM template, they will provide two files, one file for the actual ARM template and the second file for configuring the variables. So that variables or the parameters you can use for defining the differences between different kinds of environments. And this data flow which we have used in this particular demo. So that they have added in 2019, and till then the data factory were a kind of symbol orchestration kind of service, and when they added this data flow in place, it became a more kind of a way by which it can do some of the data transformations also, and data bricks is also there. And the different dashboard is also very useful, like you can have an different understanding about different kinds of uh, pipelines, how it is running. If one particular pipeline fails, what you will do, so you can have alerts as well. So here in the monitoring section you can have you can set alerts, so that if a particular, here in the monitoring section you can set the alerts as well. So in case if a particular pipeline fail, you can have that as well. And also you can have different views from this data factory, like you can have a view from the pipeline section on the basis of how pipelines are running. We can check that in a moment once this is completed. So let's refresh this one. So still it is in progress. This will take some more time. So the monitoring part you can work on by clicking on the monitoring option here. So monitoring you can done both on the resource level or on an element level, as well as you can set alerts as well. And in case if you have different data factories, and if you want a combined view, you can use a marketplace extension called the Azure Data Factory Analysis, which will combine all the different analytics from different data factories, and that is provided into one single option. So that is also another option by which you can provide. So from in this dashboard section, three kinds of views are provided, like you can understand how this data factory is running from a kind of a pipeline point of view. And another thing is like you can understand from how it is running from a trigger point of view. You understood that once the pipeline is set, we can have different triggers there. So triggers, you can set scheduled triggers or event based triggers from the blob storage. And once that is done, if you want to check out whether a particular trigger based view or trigger based triggers are run or not, you can have from that particular trigger based view as well, as from an integration runtime view as well. So still it is in progress. It usually happens. Sometimes this will take a bit more time to complete. So it's working with a massive set of data. Now in our case in a demo, it's actually fairly limited, but still it is running on a kind of a parallel environment where it is spinning those different clusters and everything. So irrespective of the data, this will take a time. Even if it is small data, this will take time. Even if it's for massive amount of data, this will scale quite well. And still in progress. So let's wait a few more minutes. So meanwhile, I like to mention that I have a meetup group which I do for hobbying purpose in the meetup.com. So that is called the Coding Talks Cloud Computing. So if you are interested, you can register. It's not registration, it's kind of simply subscribe for that, so that whenever I add new events, you will get a notification. And all the sessions that I covered, that will be included in this particular YouTube channel as well. In addition to that, I also have a hobby like a podcast as well, which is called the Coding Talks with Vishnu, which have some of the episodes as well. So I started that earlier, and it will have some of the audio set of podcast. A certain set of audio podcast that is available from this YouTube channel as well. But if you prefer an audio version, you can have that from Spotify or Apple Podcast or whatever podcast platform that you prefer. You can have from there. And video, being this is a fairly lengthy session, many won't prefer a lengthy session, but I will add definitely the segments so that you can go to a particular area and you can understand that. So now the pipeline is succeeded, as you can view now here. Everything looks fine, I think. So before we actually verify the actual data, I will just mention about the different monitoring options as well. So here in the dashboard, it will provide different kinds of views by which we can have the pipeline view, the pipeline run view, etc. This will take some time to appear here. So let's usually this will take some time to appear. So you can have different views based on how your actual data is running, actual pipeline is running, and you can set alerts as well. So if you want to set a new alert rule, like something severity happens, you can configure email or SMS or push notification so that you will always get a warning what is happened behind the scene. Now next, if you want to go further into Azure Data Factory, you can collect the different sets of public data sets that are available from different options. Like I collected this particular data set from a website when I searched openly like a public data sets. So similar way you can collect public data sets, be it CSV or whatever format. You can work with that and you can identify various insight. So again, in this demo, I show just a simple transformation like combining. So this is not the goal of this is what this demo serves to get an understanding for you to work on this data factory. But in the actual situations, while you're working on a real project, you may have to think more about on the actual data, what you want to achieve from data. So all those parts are much important in addition to this understanding as well. So the understanding you will get from this demo, but for the actual data analysis and how you can work on different connectors, you may have to try out the different options, and once you try that out, you will get a fairly good understanding of these different ways. And the MS Learn, Microsoft Learn offers also a good place for understanding different kinds of data factory related steps that you can work on. The documentation is also helpful. In addition to that, the other video tutorials and books are also helpful for understanding these things. If I want to recommend any particular tutorial, I would suggest you to check out the MS Learn, and then there are paid resources as well, like the Plural site and the Cloud Guru. Also, you can check that out as well. So that also offers a kind of different options by which you can learn. So everything is there. I think we can verify the data on the curated section. So now the curated inside the curated folder, Data Factory has generated a combined data set, and it's of size 216 KB. So let's open that as well. Okay, downloading the file. So this is the combined data sets. Okay, this one is I tried earlier on. So let's open this. So now the data is in place. So you can view all the combined data from two different files. So this is how you actually do the different kinds of transformations on the different data sets. I think that is enough for this demo and for this session. In case if you have any queries or clarification, you can always add that as comments below so that I can clarify that even at a later point of time. Thanks all for those who are attended this session, and the recorded session will be available on this YouTube channel. Once again, thank you and have a nice day. We will come up with another session on next week, possibly on some other topics that are related to cloud. Thank you.